Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Marilyn, and this video is the top 10 books that I've read in 2024. But before I begin, I wanted to let you know that this year it was very tough figuring out which books were going to be the top 10. And it wasn't because I read so many wonderful books. It's actually the opposite. I read Goodreads said I read 86 books. I think I read a little more than that. But this year was tough for me, as it was for many in the world today. And I needed to read books that were going to be comforting to me, because I've been dealing with a lot of different kinds of problems and different kinds of family situations. Some good, like my daughter got married and we have a new person living in the house. Some not so good. My partner lost his job. And also I've been dealing with losing my mobility and my independence, which is very difficult, as I was always a very headstrong, very reckless kind of person, and in some ways I still am. So these 10 books that I'm going to present to you today are books that made me comforted, that made me smile, that made me laugh. Maybe they weren't the best books of the year on any list, but for me, they did the job, and I hope that you might like them too, because I'm not a big list person. I find that I've been disappointed in a lot of books that made the list, or I wait to read them until the hoopla goes down, and I can appreciate it, not because it's a book that has a lot of praise, but because it's a book that I want to read at that particular time, if that makes any sense, if you're that kind of reader. So I hope that you enjoy this video. I'm not going to talk too much about these books, because a lot of these books I've praised in the past. And so let's start. Why don't we start? The first book is a first book from this author for me, and I don't have a physical copy. I read it on Kindle, and I'll have a copy here. It's called Dog Stories by Mary Oliver. And if you are a poetry lover, you know that Mary Oliver she passed away pretty recently, I think, was a wonderful, renowned poet. This book was a very small book, and it is about dogs. So it's a collection of poems and prose celebrating the human-canine bond. And what she does in this book that I really enjoyed was that she had her conversations with her various dogs, one named Percy, with the dog answering her back in a way that is very believable. Here is one little quote that made me laugh. Okay, she's talking to Ricky, one of her dogs. Okay, I said, but remember, you can't fix everything in the world for everybody. However, said Ricky, you can't do anything at all unless you begin. I just love that, because we're hearing Mary Oliver's wonderful thoughts, but we're really hearing Ricky's voice and what she imagines that he's telling her, and what she's imagining what he is giving her. And her dogs have meant so much to her, and you can tell, and there are stories about her various dogs. Of course there's nature, because it's Mary Oliver. So that's I don't really have these in order, but I would say that's a number 10 pick. The next book is a new genre for me. which is Japanese translated fiction, specifically murder mysteries. And I don't have a copy because I took this one out of the library. It's an older one, and I'll have it here. Inspector Imanishi Investigates by Seicho Matsumoto. Now, and it was translated by Beth, and I don't remember her last name, so I'll have it down below. Sorry, because I don't have the book with me, and I should have wrote, I know it was Beth Heald, maybe that's it. So Seicho Matsumoto was a pioneer in murder mysteries of the Golden Age type, and he's the one who popularized the genre in Japan. And when I read this book, I thought all of his books were going to be similar and that I would love them all, and that's what I wrote on Goodreads, that I would read everything he wrote. But I've read quite a few, and I've been disappointed as much as I've been just thrilled with all of his books, with the books that I read. So in this book, he investigates, we're introduced to Inspector Imanishi, and he's married, and he's very likable. For the time, he was very nice to his wife, and I say for the time because we're talking about right after the war, I think. Yeah, in the late 50s. He's investigating the murder of a former police officer who was found brutally murdered in the train tracks in Tokyo. And so that post-war Japan is part of the story, and it's really so fascinating, especially to me because I worked and lived in Japan for over 3 years, and I can picture things like the railroads and the setting, and it was just wonderful. And he, like many of our modern murder mysteries, he has a hobby of poetry. He writes haiku, which is a type of Japanese poetry, 17 lines, if I remember correctly. And so I said that if you like murder mysteries, this might be a little bit tougher because you're dealing with the Japanese language and settings and culture, but it's really worth the while. So I really recommend this book, and it was my 9th favorite. Okay, so what's next? The next book has a wonderful title, and I do have that book. I bought it, and I'm glad I did because it's one of my favorites. And it's Like a Mule Bringing Ice Cream to the Sun by Sarah Ladipo Manyika. Manyika. And what a title that is. What does it really mean? I'm not sure what it really means, but I know I love the book, even though it doesn't have like 5-star reads in the book, in Goodreads or anywhere else. It is a book that made me happy. And maybe not so coincidentally, it's about a 75-year-old woman from Nigeria. And she lives in San Francisco. And San Francisco is really a part of this book. And it shows how this woman is living with courage and facing aging and other indignities of that aging brings with dignity. I loved how a short story could be so a short book could be so satisfying when there's this protagonist that you're rooting for, and I loved her. I love both the depiction of San Francisco and Nigeria, and the beauty that she brings of getting older and still being a vibrant woman who likes to dress up in her native costume, likes men. In this case, there was gay men in San Francisco who always gave her attention, and she loved that. There's a sensuality in this book that you don't see in books about 75-year-old women. So I have to say that this her name is Dr. Morayo de Silva, and she's a former English professor, and her bookshelf is a big part of this book also. And there's many characters in the book. Okay, maybe it's not tied up totally at the end, and maybe there could have been more to this book, because this book is only 118 pages. This is the author. And it says here that she was raised in Nigeria and has lived in Kenya, France, and England. She holds a PhD from the University of California and teaches. And it was a very satisfying book to me, and I hope you do pick it up. So that is my next book. The next book I don't have a physical copy of, but I have a copy in my bookshelf somewhere, and it's called A Bird in the House by Margaret Lawrence. And I'm pretty sure that I read this book with Lindy of Lindy's Magpie Reads, and I'm thinking she gave me the book, but I'm not sure. So Lindy, let me know. So what is it about? Now, Margaret Lawrence wrote a series of books setting in the fictional town Manawaka, which is based on the town that she was raised in, which is Nipawa, Manitoba, Canada. And this year I've gotten very involved, you say, with Canadian fiction, mainly thanks to Lindy, who's introduced me to so much wonderful Canadian fiction that I ended up going back and looking at for my own Canadian fiction, which I found, and it is coming up next as one of my favorite books of the year as well. So this book, A Bird in the House, is also a semi-autobiographical novel told in interconnected stories. I think it's eight interconnected stories. And the central character, Vanessa, is a bookworm. And at the age of 40, now a married woman, she looks back on her earlier years. So it can be classified as a coming-of-age tale, but it's so more than that. It's more of a story of character portrayal, which I love in books. I don't, even when I read mysteries, I'm looking for the character portrayal more than I'm interested in the mysteries, and that's going to come up later. So when we meet her, she's 14 years old, Nessa, and she's middle-aged when her story ends. And she, like the author, dreams of being a writer, and she starts writing things down about her surroundings since she was a little girl. I really love this book. I love that the ending chapter was the titular A Bird in the House, where there was an actual bird in the house, and it really interconnected well. So I'm becoming a short story reader, so that's good. That's really good. The next book is very close to my heart, and for many reasons, and it's Nilda. This is not a wonderful copy, but it's mine, and it's by Nicholasa Mohr. And here's a picture of her in the back. She's older now. She's in her 80s. But this book, it's a story that if you want to know what it was like to be Puerto Rican, a New Yorican, a Puerto Rican born in New York, like I am, it tells you but not at the time that I was born. This is in the late 40s, and it was just like a class in Latinx culture, if you want to know what it's like. So who's Nilda? Nilda is a young Puerto Rican girl. She's an artist, and she lives in poverty. She lives with racism, of course, that during that time, which was 1940s through the World War II era. So we're following her life. She's an artist, like I said, like the author, and there's some there's graphics in this book, even in this book, and I'm going to show you one. And the author did the graphics in this book. In other books, she had other artists who did the graphics. And here is one of the graphics. And it reminded me of the graffiti that we used to see in the 70s in the New York City subways. I'm not sure if they're still there, but there were great artists that did those murals. And here it says, there's so much here. We have Petra in India. We have so much detail. Get ready or not. Come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know what exactly what it means, but it has something here that I just noticed that said mira mira, and mira means look in Spanish, and a lot of times during prejudice, when people were being prejudiced, they would call people, hey, mira mira, because that's the word that they heard in Spanish, and they would call Puerto Ricans mira mira. So I'm wondering if that's something that what she means by that. But I loved this book. It taught me so much. It showed me what maybe my father, when he came in 1949, what kind of situation that he found here from Puerto Rico. And Nilda is a book that should be read more. I think the author is not discovered enough, and for a young adult book, you can read it at any age, young adult to, I would say it's up to middle grade, from middle grade to adult. And there was another thing that I wanted to say, that if you know who Hamilton and In the Heights creator Lin-Manuel Miranda, he says this was his favorite book, and what drove him to be creative. So I read other books that she read, but Nilda will always be a favorite on my shelf. And by the way, I gave this recommendation to Lindy, and she loved it as well. So I was really happy about that. The next book I don't have with me, and I'm not going to talk about too much because I did a whole video about a response to the negativity that book got, and I loved it, and I'll have it here. It's The Clocks by Agatha Christie, Dame Agatha. And I won't talk, like I said, too much about it. I will just say that the premise is that Sheila, who's a stenographer, is sent to a house where there's a dead body and a lot of clocks. She runs out, and she runs into the arms of a man who's a marine biologist / spy, and it takes place in a small neighborhood. Now, the only thing I'll say about this is why I loved it so much. It takes place in that neighborhood. Agatha Christie had a wonderful time with this book, writing this book. You can tell it's all her things she loves: houses, gardening, cat people. I shouldn't say cat people. I should say cat lovers, where she had good things and bad things to say about that. And just a slice of life in that time that I enjoyed. Yes, I did figure out who, and I usually don't figure out who done it, and I did. I didn't care. I had a wonderful time reading it, and just as I think Agatha did, Dame Agatha did. So that's The Clocks. Okay, so what's next? The next book I was very lucky to find and was recommended in Canada in a bookshop, And it's also by Seicho Matsumoto. And I have the copy because I bought it, and it wasn't even available. It wasn't even on Goodreads at that time. I haven't checked to see if it is on Goodreads now. And it's Point Zero, if I didn't say, by translated by Louise Kawai, and also by Seicho Matsumoto. I loved this book. This was one of the two of the many books that I read that I really loved. And not to tell you too much about it, because I want you to read it. I really do. And so it's set in 1950, post-war Japan again. I guess I like this era. A woman, Taiko, meets her husband through a matchmaker, which was popular at that time. And after their honeymoon, he disappears. And she decides to, which is unusual, to investigate the murder with the help of other people. She needed the help of other people. But she travels. You see so much of Japan in this book. I loved it. What does it say about it? It says, Matsumoto pushes the art of the detective story in Japan to new dimensions, depicting Japanese society with unprecedented realism. So we're gonna, in this book, you're gonna see post-war Japan, and I was there for it. Let's put it that way. So get this book; it's wonderful. The next book I don't have, but I do have a book by this author, and I just read it. And this one is No One Tells You About This, and No One Tells You This. And I talked about it by Glynnis Macnicol. But the book that is on my favorite list, and I'm going to have it here, is I'm Mostly Here to Enjoy Myself. I love this book. It came when I needed it. I read this afterwards, even though this book came before. I read this after. No One Tells You This. This is when she was, when the author, who is Canadian, and was about to reach 40. Excuse me. This one, 30. In I'm Mostly Here to Enjoy Myself, I found in a bookstore in the travel section about Paris. So I was lucky enough to read this by my good friend Nathan. Sent me a copy on Kindle, but I also found it on audio. I didn't, and the funny part is I said I didn't like it on audio because I was confused. I didn't know that the author was Canadian at first, and I thought, and she's talking about New York and going to Paris, and I'm thinking she just doesn't sound right. But when I read it, you know, on my Kindle, oh, it's one of my favorites of the year. So what I liked about her is she's a wonderful writer. She's able to twist the narrative in such a way that you're never bored. She's likable. She's searching, brutally honest. I love that. And yeah, she's about to turn 47. So the premise of this book is that she's just experienced the first wave of COVID in New York, and she's about to turn 47, and she's been very isolated. And I know that from having a sister who was hospitalized during the first wave of COVID, that it was a terrible time, and people were leaving, and she's was isolated, and she misses the feeling of just being touched physically by another person. So she goes to Paris when it first opens, and she's there to enjoy herself in every way that you can think of, and she does. And lest you think it's more of a sensual book and a sexy book, which it is, but it's also about a bunch of women who she knew through the years that that are getting together and helping each other get through life. And that, found family kind of book is wonderful. She's a wonderful writer. I will read anything she writes. And so I hope she writes more. Now, the last book that is my favorite, that is close to my favorite, only because it's a reread. And I'll have it here. It's Gathered Together in My Name by Maya Angelou. Now, this year I did my first event, the Maya Angelou Phenomenal Woman Readathon, which was very successful to me personally and to many other people who, it had a tag that I created, my first original tag, and it was a success. And it made me so, so happy. Gathered Together in My Name is a banned book, by the way, so it kind of gets kudos for that if you're into reading banned books. And it's the second volume of the Maya Angelou autobiography. And it covers 4 years, from 44 to 48. I should tell you that during the readathon, I read all of Maya Angelou's books, all of them. And it was an experience that I will treasure for the rest of my life. So this ends when she's 21, and it covers a period pre-civil rights, just after the war, and how resourceful she was in good and bad ways. She did so many things. She cooked, she waitressed, she managed a restaurant, she sold clothes, she learned to dance, she ran a brothel, and the truth is she was trafficked. And that's not normally known about this book or discussed, because her pimp was an Episcopalian minister, preacher. If nothing's new under the sun, but that one really shocked me. She almost joined the army, and she became a mother. So she's honest, she's open, she didn't mince any words, she didn't tell you what wasn't true. She went there. And in an interview in 1995, and I found this very interesting, I wrote it down and I wanted to share this with you. People asked her why she was so brutally honest in that book. She said, "I wrote about my experiences because I thought too many people tell young folks, 'I never did anything wrong.' Who? Moi? Never I. I have no skeletons in my closet. In fact, I have no closet." They lie like that, and then young people find themselves in situations and they think, "Damn, I must be a pretty bad guy. My mom or dad never did anything wrong." They can't forgive themselves and go on with their lives. So I wrote the book Gathered Together in My Name. In other words, for them, for the people that came after. And I think that her honesty, her being brutally honest about what she went through and how far she came in other books is very exhilarating and very important. So if I hadn't read it before, it would have been my favorite book of the year. So what was my favorite book of the year? Ta-da! It's Barbara Pym, her last book. It's called The Sweet Dove Died. And let me just show you what a beautiful copy I own. Now, I have to say that this book was my favorite, even though it didn't have the church environment that her books always have. Just for this one quote that one character says, "Life is cruel and we do terrible things to each other." So Barbara Pym wrote this in later life. She said it was her favorite book. And we have aging, falling in love. We have, there's gay characters. There's sarcasm, laugh out loud funny that Barbara Pym is known for. And I said, don't miss this gem. And I really mean it. So Humphrey, a widowed antiques dealer, and his nephew James, who he is attempting to teach about the antiques trade, meet this elegant aging beauty named Leonora Eyre at a book sale. And Humphrey is thinking, meeting such a woman at such a place filled Humphrey with horror. But they become friends, and there's other characters in this book. There's gay characters. There's eccentric young women characters. There's also the conundrum, especially in that time, and I think this is 70s, of getting older, of romance, of putting up a front. It was written in 78. This is her last book. I loved this book. And Jilly Cooper said, few other writers have given me more laughter and more pleasure. And I agree. And what did I need this year? I needed laughter. I needed pleasure. I needed escapism. Yes, I did read other books that were important books. I read nonfiction, but none of them that I felt I could give 10 stars. I would give Barbara Pym 10 stars. But none of those books gave me that feeling. And I remember in The Clocks, for example, by Agatha Christie, there was a point I laughed out loud. And of course, this book I laughed out loud. And other books just transported me to other places. So I hope you like this video of my 10 best top books of 2024. I'm hoping that 2025 will bring me a better year, health-wise, money-wise. So on that vein, please like this video, comment, and please subscribe if you liked it. And I will see you in a new video where I will talk about my plans for the new year. And I'm wishing everybody to have a happy holiday, whatever you're celebrating, Christmas, Hanukkah for me, and the new year to come, that we should all have health, wealth, happiness, and aloha.